was young, radiant, and full of dreams. Ashley Ellerin, a 22-year-old fashion student, was about to go on a date with rising star Ashton Kutcher. But when he knocked on her door, she didn't answer. What he saw through the window would haunt him for years. Inside, Ashley lay murdered, stabbed 47 times by a man the world would later call the Hollywood Ripper. This is the chilling story of a predator hiding in plain sight, and the night Hollywood lost one of its brightest lights. She was just 3 years old, full of life, giggles, and the kind of curiosity only a child can carry. Victoria Rose Smith had already survived so much in her short life and was finally about to be adopted.
Ashley Ellerin moved to Hollywood with big dreams and boundless energy. She was studying fashion, partying with friends, and building a life in Los Angeles. Her charm drew people in, including celebrities. One of them was Ashton Kutcher, who she had recently started casually dating. By early 2001, Ashley lived in a rented bungalow on Pinehurst Road, a small, cozy place near the Hollywood Hills. It was the kind of house that looked charming from the outside, but held secrets within. Across the street lived a man named Michael Gargiulo, a repairman and air conditioner installer. He came off as helpful and quiet. He even offered to fix Ashley's heater. But no one knew that Gargiulo had a dark obsession, and Ashley had unknowingly become his next target. Gargiulo was more than a handyman. He was a methodical killer, someone who would insert himself into women's lives, watch their routines, and then strike when they were most vulnerable. Ashley had reportedly mentioned feeling like she was being watched, but she brushed it off. After all, Hollywood is full of weirdos, right? On the evening of February 21, 2001, Ashley was getting ready for a date with Ashton Kutcher. She spoke to friends on the phone and even had plans to attend a Grammy after-party. Everything seemed normal. Ashton arrived at her house around 10:45 p.m., but no one answered the door. He peeked inside the window and saw what he believed was spilled red wine on the floor. He thought she had already left or didn't want to hang out and left. What Ashton didn't know was that Ashley had already been murdered, brutally. She had been stabbed 47 times, most of the wounds to her chest, back, and neck. Some were so deep, they penetrated through her rib cage. Her body was discovered the next morning by her roommate. The LAPD was stunned. There were no signs of forced entry, no valuables taken, and no obvious motive. But the brutality of the crime pointed to someone who was obsessed and filled with rage. Ashley's friends and family were devastated. The media fixated on Ashton's connection to the case, but investigators had something more pressing. A serial predator might be on the loose. Michael Gargiulo had already killed before, long before Ashley. In 1993, back in Illinois, he murdered his 18-year-old neighbor, Trisha Picaccio, stabbing her to death outside her home. He wasn't charged back then, but the pattern had started. After Ashley's murder, Gargiulo kept a low profile, but he didn't stop. In 2005, he attacked another woman, Maria Bruno, a mother of 4. He broke into her apartment and stabbed her 17 times in her sleep. Again, no one knew who had done it. Then came Michelle Murphy, a 26-year-old woman who unknowingly became Gargiulo's next target in 2008. He broke into her Santa Monica apartment. But this time, things didn't go as planned. Michelle fought back. Despite being stabbed, she managed to escape and Gargiulo fled, bleeding. His blood was left at the scene, and finally, DNA matched him to multiple murders. Michael Gargiulo was arrested, and suddenly, the pieces fell into place. He had been living near every one of his victims. He studied their habits. He broke in while they were alone, often attacking them while they slept or prepared for bed. Prosecutors would later call him a serial sexual thrill killer. In court, Ashton Kutcher testified. He told the jury that he had arrived at Ashley's house that night, peeked in, and saw what he thought was wine. It wasn't. It was her blood. He had unknowingly stood inches away from the aftermath of a horror scene. The verdict: guilty on all counts, including the murders of Ashley Ellerin and Maria Bruno, and the attempted murder of Michelle Murphy. In July 2021, Michael Gargiulo was sentenced to death. The judge called him a psychopathic, cold-blooded killer who selected women for murder for his own sexual satisfaction. The trial didn't begin until 2019, nearly 18 years after Ashley's murder. But when it did, the evidence was overwhelming. The jury heard from victims' family members, detectives, and forensics experts. Today, he sits on death row at San Quentin State Prison. Ashley's life was full of promise, a young woman who never got to show the world her brilliance. But her case helped bring a monster to justice and may have saved others from becoming his next victim, the Hollywood Ripper is now silent. But Ashley Ellerin's story will always speak for the women who never got the chance.
Okay, so you know how we're always hearing about these like big Hollywood stories, people chasing their dreams in LA?
Right, yeah.
Well, this deep dive, it starts with one of those dreamers, a young woman, Ashley Ellerin. She moved to LA, full of energy, and just threw herself into the fashion scene. Built up this really vibrant social life, even ended up kind of casually dating Ashton Kutcher.
Yeah, it really sets the scene for you, right? This young woman embracing everything Hollywood promises, like opportunity, excitement, a chance to build a new life.
For sure.
Yeah.
And so by early 2001, she's living in this charming little bungalow up on Pinehurst Road, right in the Hollywood Hills.
Sounds idyllic.
Oh, yeah, total movie set vibe.
Yeah.
This cozy little place, picture-perfect exterior. But as we find out so often, what you see on the surface can be totally misleading.
Oh, absolutely. Appearances can be deceiving.
Because you see, right across the street from Ashley lived a man named Michael Gargiulo.
And, just another face in the crowd to anyone else in the neighborhood, right? He was working as a repairman, installing air conditioners, even offered to help Ashley out, fix her heater.
Mm-hmm.
Just seemed like a typical, helpful, quiet guy.
Okay, so let's unpack this because this is where things get really dark and twisted.
Yeah, where it goes sideways.
So what started as this seemingly normal neighborly connection, right? Like I said, he offered to fix her heater.
Sure.
That was actually masking this truly terrifying obsession. Like this deep dive, we're going to explore how that ordinary everyday facade was hiding a predator and how it led to this really, really tragic case.
Oh, yeah.
And, Ashley even told her friends that she felt like she was being watched.
Oh, wow.
But she kind of just brushed it off.
Yeah.
Maybe thought it was just part of living in Hollywood.
Like being in a fishbowl.
Exactly.
Yeah, makes sense.
So let's set the scene for you for this fateful evening, February 21st, 2001.
All right.
Ashley's getting ready for a date.
Oh, yeah?
And not just any date, a date with Ashton Kutcher.
Wow.
She's on the phone with friends, making plans for a Grammy after party. Seems like a totally normal Thursday night in LA.
Right, just another night out.
Yeah, but then Ashton arrives at her place around 10:45 p.m.
Okay.
Knocks on the door, no answer. So he peeks through the window, and this detail is just awful when you think about it later.
Yeah, I bet.
He sees what he thinks is spilled red wine on the floor.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so he just figures she must have already left for the night or maybe just didn't want to see him. So he leaves.
Yeah, you can see how he'd assume that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the truly horrifying truth, the thing Ashton was completely unaware of, was that Ashley had already been murdered.
Oh, God, that's awful.
Yeah, and the details are really, really disturbing. She was stabbed 47 times. Most of the wounds were on her chest, her back, and her neck.
God.
Some of the stab wounds were so deep they went all the way through her rib cage.
Oh, my God.
Her roommate found her body the next morning.
Stop.
It's just terrible. So the initial police investigation, it was kind of baffling. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing was taken from the apartment.
So not a robbery.
Exactly. It didn't seem like there was any reason for someone to do this to her. But like we said, the sheer brutality of it all, it just screamed obsession and rage.
Right. So that really narrows down the possibilities.
Yeah, and as you can imagine, the focus for Ashley's friends, family, and of course the media went straight to Ashton Kutcher.
Celebrity connection, yeah,
Right.
sure.
But behind the scenes, the investigators, they were considering a much more disturbing possibility that they might be dealing with a serial predator.
Okay, so multiple victims.
And this is where it gets really disturbing. They started looking into Michael Gargiulo's past.
Okay, the neighbor.
Yes. And they uncovered this really chilling connection to a murder that had happened years before,
Really?
back in 1993 in Illinois.
Wow. Okay, so this wasn't his first time.
No, it wasn't. He had murdered his 18-year-old neighbor, Tricia Piccaccio. He stabbed her to death outside her house.
Oh.
And get this, he was never charged for it.
What? How is that possible?
I know, right? It's
Ugh.
crazy. So this was a huge red flag for them.
Yeah.
This was not an isolated incident. This guy had a history of violence against women going back years.
Yeah, a clear pattern.
Exactly. So after Ashley's murder, Gargiulo tried to keep a low profile,
Yeah, Layla.
but he didn't stop killing.
Oh, God.
In 2005, he targeted Maria Bruno, a mother of 4.
Oh, no.
He broke into her apartment in a horrifying echo of what he did to Ashley.
Oh, no.
He stabbed her 17 times while she was sleeping.
Jeez.
And again, at the time, no one knew who did it.
So scary to think he was just out there living his life.
I know, right? Just blending in.
Yeah.
Then in 2008, things changed.
Oh, how so?
Gargiulo attacked a woman named Michelle Murphy in her Santa Monica apartment.
Okay.
He broke in just like before, but this time Michelle fought back.
She fought back.
She did. She was stabbed,
Yeah.
but she managed to get away. And in his panic to escape, Gargiulo left something really important behind.
What was that?
His blood.
His blood.
Yeah, so that was a huge break in the case.
Oh, wow. So they could finally identify him.
Exactly. The DNA from Gargiulo's blood matched him to the attack on Michelle, and it also connected him to the murders of Ashley and Maria.
Wow. So all the cases were finally linked.
Yes. So he was finally arrested. And as investigators dug deeper, they started to see this really disturbing pattern in his behavior.
Like what?
He'd been living really close to all of his victims. He would watch them learn their routines, and then he would break into their homes when they were alone.
God, so creepy.
I know. He often attacked them while they were sleeping or getting ready for bed. It was this calculated predatory behavior that led the prosecutor to describe him as a serial sexual thrill killer.
God, that sends chills down my spine.
I know, it's awful. So during the trial, Ashton Kutcher gave his testimony. It was really powerful.
I did.
Talk about arriving at Ashley's house that night, looking through the window and see what he thought was spilled wine.
Oh, so awful.
It is, right. And then realizing later that it was actually her blood. It just emphasized how close he was to this horrible crime without having any clue.
It's like he was right there.
Right there.
Wow.
The trial itself finally started in 2019, almost 18 years after Ashley's murder.
Wow, it took that long.
I know. But the prosecution presented a ton of evidence. The jury heard from Michelle Murphy herself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They also heard from the families of Ashley and Maria and from all the detectives and forensic experts who had worked on the case.
So they really built a strong case.
They did. And the jury came back with a verdict of guilty on all counts.
Wow.
That included first-degree murder for Ashley and Maria and attempted murder for Michelle.
So justice was served.
It was bros.
Yeah.
In July 2021, Michael Gargiulo was sentenced to death.
Wow.
The judge called him a psychopathic, cold-blooded killer who selected women for murder for his own sexual satisfaction.
It's just chilling to think someone like that exists.
It really is. And he's currently on death row at San Quentin State Prison.
So he can't hurt anyone else.
No, he can't. It's just a really tragic story.
Yeah.
You know, Ashley Ellerin has so much potential. She had so much life ahead of her. And while her case did ultimately help bring this dangerous man to justice and probably save other lives, it came at a really, really high cost.
It's true. There's no happy ending here.
No, there isn't. The Hollywood Ripper is finally silent. But Ashley's story and Maria's story and Michelle's story, they're all incredibly important. It's a reminder that this can happen anywhere.
It's true. Evil can hide in plain sight.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think what's so shocking about this whole case is how a seemingly normal everyday connection, a new neighbor offering to help out, could actually be hiding such a terrifying threat.
Yeah, it really makes you think about who you trust.
It does.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that danger can be lurking anywhere, even in the places where we feel safest.
Look like our own homes.
Exactly. And it's so important that we remember Ashley and Maria and the role their case played in catching this killer. We also have to remember Michelle Murphy and how brave she was in fighting back.
Her strength is incredible.
It is. So here's a final thought for you to think about. The idea of safety, that feeling of security that we often take for granted in our homes and in our communities, it's actually really fragile.
It is.
And this case forces us to think about how important it is to be vigilant, not out of fear, but out of respect for how vulnerable we all are.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It also makes you realize that even the most ordinary interactions, like saying hello to a neighbor, can sometimes have really profound and unexpected consequences.
You never really know who you're dealing with.
That's the truth.
Yeah, it's a scary thought, but an important one.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a really fascinating but disturbing deep dive.
It has. It really makes you think.
It does, for sure.
Well, that's it for this episode. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
See you then.